Always my soulmate. My watermelon's melon felon. Chapter 26. Diamond in the Rough. 7-year-old Katsuki Yuri was fidgeting on the table he'd been told to sit on. He was supposed to be getting shots for something. They would make sure that he didn't get sick. His mother had told him that if he did well, he could have an extra large bowl of katsudan when he got home. He was trying to be good. He was also very scared. It couldn't be worse than that time he'd sprained his ankle and couldn't dance for a few days. He was told it would be quick and over soon. He even read about it before coming because he wanted to be sure. But it still seemed scary. Pain wasn't cool or fun. The doctor was nice. She had a wide smile, and her eyes were blue and not brown like his mother's were. She told him that he was being good and even thanked him for behaving. His mother patted his back in support. "Hold out your right arm, please." Yuri did so and tried to make himself stop shaking. It wasn't that scary. He wasn't a baby. He could do this. Still, the shaking continued, and he had to sigh in frustration with himself. He was 7. He should be able to handle this. He wouldn't die or anything. She rolled his sleeve up and cleaned his arm with something that smelled gross and was cold. Bravery practically fled when the needle came out, and Yuri forced himself to look away. He wasn't ready. He closed his eyes just to be sure. Nothing happened. Several seconds passed, and still nothing happened. He could feel the doctor's grip on his arm. He could feel the glove on her hand. But she wasn't doing anything yet. Yuri cracked open one eye and turned to peek through his thick lashes, only to find himself gaping wide-eyed at the sight before him. The doctor was holding his arm still, and the needle was still in her other hand, but it was broken. It was broken because Yuri's arm had become weird. Like a diamond. He could sort of see the floor through it, and it sparkled like a rainbow in the overhead light of the room. A diamond arm. "Yu-chan, look in the mirror," he heard his mother say. His head turned, and he found himself staring through his own body. He could see the poster that was taped on the wall behind him. He couldn't make out the words, but the yellow color was bright enough for him to see clearly. "I think your son has just discovered his power." Yuri's former worry had been completely tossed aside because he looked pretty cool. Even his eyes had changed and looked like diamonds. His hair had turned into diamond as well. Wow, this is indeed amazing. How are we to go about giving him his follow-ups? And just like that, his good mood was ruined. He still had to get his shots. But if his arm ended up breaking the needle, then how could they get the needle in? And how did he return to normal? He couldn't walk outside like this. People wouldn't stop looking at him because he sparkled. He'd have too much attention. Suddenly being a diamond wasn't so cool. Absolutely not. But Yakov, it would be so cool. And it would get me even more fans. The old man didn't seem to want to budge on it, though. And for that, Victor was frustrated. He could literally turn into a diamond. His whole body, his cells even, turned into diamonds. And it was amazing. He would be one of a kind. No one could be able to overlook him. But Yakov had completely shut down his incredibly genius idea of showing off at Junior World. It wasn't fair. "Vidya, I care about you very much, and I know what would happen if you let this loose," said Yakov as he rubbed a hand down his tired face. "People would flock to you, and some would be so foolish that they would take their idol worship of you to the extreme, and possibly hurt themselves in either an attempt to make themselves your soulmate, or to make themselves resemble you." Victor's almost dire need to reveal his power began to fade as he thought about it. "You know that some fans are so rabid that they would do anything to be the soulmate of their idol. And while it's courageous of you to want to reveal this part of yourself, it can only cause you unnecessary drama. But it would also cause great disturbances and possibly even danger. It wouldn't do for you to reveal this until you either meet your soulmate or just decide that you don't care if you have a soulmate or not." Sometimes he really hated how much sense Yakov could make. It wasn't fair. But he understood. It wasn't just about him, after all. It was about others. He just wished it didn't have to be like that. He wished he could show off his power like other people did. Some could fly and others could manipulate the elements. Victor turned into a large diamond. and he couldn't tell anyone. Reclining in the comfortable chair in Yakov's office, Victor inquired, "What do we say when I'm no doubt asked about my power?" The old man linked his fingers together in contemplation. "You don't lie. Simply tell them you're waiting for the right moment, and that moment will happen when you feel it. Evade any other questions about it. It isn't as if it's their business anyhow." He sighed. "Yes, coach. I know it's unfair, Vitya, but I would rather you not have to go through what I went through before I met Lilia. It's better for everyone this way." He just had to grin and bear it. And maybe someday in the future he'd meet his soulmate. Or he would let his interest in soulmates come out. Though he doubted that would ever occur. Either way, he was going to see it happen. He just didn't know when, though. "Yu-chan, take a deep breath. You need to relax, otherwise you might end up crushing the cup by accident." Living as a human diamond was hard, Yuri learned. He had slowly but surely started to learn how to control himself, but it took a long time to work out. Whenever he was emotional, his control of his change was lost. He'd broken a lot of cups and dishes, and even a table. It seemed he was really strong in his diamond form, and even the slightest movement could destroy something by accident. The first instance happened at school. He'd been in the washroom, and somehow he was startled. His arm turned into a diamond again, and his sudden movement ended up with him slicing through a urinal and leaving a large gash across the porcelain. White fragments of the destroyed urinal scattered across the floor, and Yuri was quick to get out before someone could come in and blame him for it. He never used that room ever again after that. He didn't tell anyone about it either. The second time he lost his control had been when he ended up cutting straight through one of the tables in the dining area. It had been a late night, and no one but his sister had been around to witness it, but it had led to him having to do yoga alongside his skating and dancing, all so he could learn how to calm himself. It wasn't fun. Dancing was fun. He was good at it. Skating was fun. He was getting better at it. Yoga was not fun, even if he was good at it. Breathe deeply. "I am! My lungs don't really expand any further," he sniped in return, unable to help himself. He wasn't perfect, and having to do the same thing every day was boring. He wanted to be out there skating, and instead, he had to sit inside and stand in weird positions for several minutes at a time. His mother simply fixed him with the judgment eyes in order to make him feel guilty. "Think of it this way, Yuri," she said, using his name to prove how displeased she was. "No skating until you can control yourself." She didn't even look at him when he gaped at her. She simply sat there, sipping her tea. "Accidentally or not, you could end up hurting someone if you don't put more effort into controlling your power. We want to help you, but you need to meet us halfway." His parents had tried helping him to the best of their ability, but all they could do was support him. Their powers couldn't be used to help because their shared telepathy, for some reason, didn't work on him when in his diamond form. Therefore, they couldn't help him like they had helped his sister Mari when her fire powers acted up in her younger years. "I'm sorry," he murmured, feeling bad for having such a horrible attitude. "I'm just frustrated." "As expected, but you can't keep pushing it off. Embracing this now will save you pain later on." "Okay. I can vogue better and faster than you," Victor scoffed at the young girl. "I think you mean that I can vogue better and faster than you. You have tiny arms and hands, but mine have experience." "Nuh-uh, I'm young and pretty. You're just an old man, and your arms would break if you even tried," he gasped theatrically, hand against his heart, as he took in the offending words of the young redhead. "What is your name, tiny person?" "I'm Mila Babisheva. I'm going to be the best of the ladies when I grow up, so don't you dare forget me." She only reached up to his waist if she was lucky, but her face was stern, and she seemed to believe in her own words very much. "If you think you can vogue better than I, Mila, you need to prove it. You're on!" She proceeded to move her arms far too quickly for him to keep up with, and when she finished, she stared up at him expectantly. Speed is my power," No one can grow cooler or faster than me, Nikiforov. Damn, she could definitely do it faster than him. He settled for saying, I hope you know how to slow down. If the judges can't see your arms, you won't be getting presentation points. Ah! She groaned. He laughed, charmed by her chubby cheeks and sparkling blue eyes. I suppose I can help you if you want. Ah! Yuri jumped, though thankfully he didn't scream in the least. That meant that he was getting better at handling jump scares and the like. Yuko popping out from behind a bush wasn't appreciated, but at least he knew he had enough self-control by now not to scream like a baby. See? You didn't change at all, she cheered, throwing an arm around his shoulders. You can totally handle going out in public and being a superstar skater. He flushed, touched by her support, even if he felt he wasn't exactly ready. But if he didn't start branching himself out, he wouldn't get anywhere, and then he'd be so far behind. Yuri wanted to skate in order to be equal to his idol. Victor Nikiforov was the god of figure skating, and if Yuri was going to prove himself, he had to start putting himself out there and being more adventurous with the future of his own career. Your gold at Junior Nationals proves that you can totally handle the stress of competing. So you need to start researching for a better coach for when you enter the senior division. Morino-san doesn't coach seniors after all. I know, he said, shoulders slumping at the thought of having to go coach shopping. Takeshi and I will help you. Don't worry. He had to flash her a grin at that. Yuko wanted to see him succeed and had been part of his support base for years. Of course she would stick by him through this. And then force her soulmate Takeshi to help them too. Though, to be fair, Takeshi would help anyway, simply because he and Yuri had an interesting friendship, and of course he would want to see a Hasetsu native make a name for himself somehow. It was about the pride of their hometown first and foremost. Thanks, no problem. Though he would be sure to tell them that he didn't want them to use their powers of shape-shifting to trick anyone. It wouldn't be fair. Yurochka, what's your power? The blonde stared at him, his face almost glowing red. Whether from anger or embarrassment, Victor didn't know, but what he did know was that the other was just so adorable. Why do you want to know, Min? I'll show you mine if you show me yours. Mila already shows hers, and Yorgi's is hard to miss. Yorgi's voice did this annoying thing where it got loud and broke glass. Not the most pleasant of powers. As all of them were students of Yakov, of course, they would end up knowing about each other's powers in great detail. Yuri Plazetsky was a newbie to the fold, and he was a rising junior star in Russia and had big aspirations. He also had a rather foul mouth, even on the best of occasions. The blonde huffed, and in his place stood a cat. A cute, orange and white striped domesticated feline. Oh, you're so cute, Yarachka. Fuck you, asshole. Victor blinked in shock as something so cute ended up cursing so terribly. And the adorable kitten morphed into a much larger feline, but was still tiny. Instead of being a usual cat found on the street, this one was a tiger cub. No wonder you're so ferocious. You're our little kitty. Shut up. Victor chuckled, feeling a little envious. He would be able to do so many cool things if he could turn into a dog like his darling Maka. Some people had really amazing powers. So do you behave yourself like this, or you are disgusting? Yuri returned to his human form and stalked off towards the ring, grumbling about jerks and people he couldn't stand to be around. You don't want to see my power? It's probably stupid. The teen is very much like the cat it just turned into. Victor pouted. It is not. It makes me strong and lets me do cool things. Yuri paused, one foot on the ice. His head had turned and he was eyeing Victor up expectantly. Grinning, Victor changed in the blink of an eye until his entire body was just one large diamond, seemingly cut to mimic his appearance perfectly. What the heck? Isn't it great? I don't need to breathe like this, and I don't feel temperatures, so the hot and the cold don't bother me. I can lift a car too, and once I skated into a wall, but I didn't feel anything when I connected in. I also glow in the dark a bit. The teen had abandoned his intentions to start practicing and was instead hesitantly stepping closer, eyes wide and filled with slight amazement. Are you heavier than you are normally? Yes, I'm basically a big rock right now. Of course I weigh more. How am I supposed to know? It's not like I'm the one who turned into a wannabe chandelier. Victor gasped. You take that back! No! The teen turned and fled, leaving Victor to pout again. Was no one but him ever going to be amazed by his power? Mila called his a disco ball, and Yorkie thought he was a perfect vision of romantic thought, whatever that meant. For once, he just wanted someone to say, "Hey, cool!" Was that too much to ask for? Holy crap, bro! Yuri froze in place, his extended arm melting back into the creamy color he was used to seeing his whole life. Turning, he found himself staring at a wide-eyed Peachy, who was smiling happily. That's so cool! What happened to your arm? I turned into a big diamond! Cool! It's almost as cool as being able to speak to and understand rodents. My power seems cooler though, dude. Rolling his eyes, Yuri shrugged. Depending on how you look at it, I guess. I don't need to breathe, I glow in the dark, and I can lift a lot. Peachy nodded a few times, hand on his chin, as he contemplated Yuri's words. I suppose that's pretty cool. How about we be equally awesome? If you want, though talking animals seems pretty great. Yeah, but you're like a disco ball, Peachy gasped. Then, what if we turned all the lights off and you skated in the dark? Would it look as cool and glowy as I think it would be? Probably? Let's do it! He ended up being as cool and glowy as Peachy thought he would be. A light white shimmer outlined his body, and he had to admit it was pretty cool. How is our dear 5-time winner doing? Christoph Giametti asked as he sidled up beside Victor. Victor sighed. I'm fine. Sota bored though. Come on, you won again. Shouldn't you be happy? I should be, agreed Victor. But I'm really not. It's just boring now. Chris took a deep drink from his champagne flute, emptying the glass easily. To think you win so much that it ends up losing its appeal. How strange. He hummed in agreement, eyes trailing over to the one corner of the room where Katsuki Yuri stood, imbibing liquor as if it was his final chance to do so. Since his poor showing the day before, the young man had been in a terrible mood, and his coach seemed to have dragged him to the banquet against what little will he seemed to have left. Did little Yuri catch your eye? Chris asked once he noticed where Victor was pointedly staring. He denied my offer for a photo. He couldn't help but pout. No one had ever done that before. Well, he's had a rough few days. He posted a pic on Instagram 2 days ago. It was of his poodle saying that he was a good dog and that he was grateful to have him for the time he was alive. His sister commented that he was put down quickly, so there wasn't any further pain. Dead pets kind of throw people off, so he's had a crappy week. It's probably got nothing to do with you. He wilted even further at the thought of someone having to deal with the loss of their pet while during such an important moment in their life. And Yuri had a poodle, too. No wonder he was so out of it when he performed. His free program had been a drastic change from his short program. He went from 4th to last place quickly, and now there was at least a reason as to why. Hey look, he's heading for Plazitsky, Chris said, making Victor look up. Whatever was said had the blonde glaring his heart out and screaming, "Fine!" at the top of his lungs. Little did Victor know that that would be the best night of his life in the past 20 years. You know, if at any time you need to see if he's genuine, I'm sure either of your parents would gladly check for you. You would never know. Yuri winced at the suggestion of his parents using telepathy on Victor, all to see if he was truly determined to help Yuri. It didn't sit right with him. Victor isn't the type of person to use others like you're suggesting, and I would never condone such a thing. His actions can speak for him instead. Mari shrugged and snapped her fingers a few times until a small flame appeared on her thumb. She lit her new cigarette with it and nodded to herself. At least he doesn't seem like a jerk. Yuri snorted. He is! Trust me, he's a bit of a spoiled jerk, but he isn't doing it to be rude or spiteful. He's just very blunt, whether trying to be hopeful or not. Victor Nikiforov was a jerk at times. An attractive one, but still a jerk. But that was fine. He wasn't a jerk to hurt someone. He was just really blunt with his feelings and intentions. Like when he called Yuri a piglet. That had pissed him off a bit, simply because he wasn't as fat as was being implied. Yuri had to literally pull Victor aside and explain to him why he didn't like that. and he had to equate it to the dumb blonde jokes Victor hated, because sometimes people would call him such a thing and he didn't appreciate it. Victor needed to learn that piglet to Yuri held the same meaning as dumb blonde to Victor. Victor called him Katidon as a nickname now. It showed that he listened and that he cared about Yuri's feelings, even if he wasn't that great with dealing with them. That was why his actions would speak more for Yuri, and why he didn't want either of his parents rooting through the man's mind. It wasn't right, and it wasn't fair. Besides, in just the month that Victor had been around, things had changed for Yuri. Yuri's mind seemed to just open up, and Victor had been the one to help him realize that he wasn't alone, and that he actually had a large support base of his own. That he didn't need to do things by himself. He'd always had such, but it took Victor Nikiforov pointing it out for him to fully realize it. And he felt a lot better thanks to the other man. So, no, he would not approve of such a breach in his privacy. Has he told you his power yet? No, and if he ever does, then so be it. But it's not as if he's required to. Besides, if Yuri would dare feel upset over that, he wouldn't really have a right to. Because it wasn't as if he was jumping to show off his power either. Yuri! You are the tastiest katsudon around! Victor couldn't help but throw his arms around the younger man and pull him close. I'm so proud of how well you did! Your landing on that sound cow has gotten better! See? When you have confidence, you can do amazing things! Well, I mean, you did tell me to skate like I'm trying to seduce you. A thrill ran down Victor's spine when he heard those words. Oh, my Yuri was confident that he could seduce me. The Russian bird nuzzling into Yuri's soft hair, messing it up. The flush that stained the other's cheeks was adorable, and Victor beamed at his success. Getting Yuri to blush was always fun. We're in public! The man groaned, trying to free himself from Victor's grasp and not succeeding because when Victor wanted to give hugs, hugs were given. They got their score, Yuri. The man stopped struggling and looked up as the numbers flashed across the screen. That's the highest short program score I've ever gotten. I know, and I'm super proud of you. He squeezed his dear student even harder, unable to withhold the urge. Yuri was so adorable. I'm going to call your mother and tell her all about it. She most likely saw it on the television though, but she would be very happy to hear from you in person. I'm sure Mama Hiroko loves you very much and wants to support you, Yuri. Yuri sighed. I know, I promise I'll call her later. Good boy! Victor cheered, hugging even harder than before. Control yourself! But it's so hard when you're being so cute, Yuri. So, are your actions in any way supposed to show everyone what your relationship is with your student? Victor rolled his eyes at Chris, who was too busy leaning over the bar to order a drink while trying to look sexy to focus on his exasperation. Yuri and I haven't talked about it, though I think I'm being obvious. Though if what his ballet instructor tells me is true, no one has ever shown any interest in him. What? Chris hissed, looking mortified. With an ass like that, no one has ever tried to get in his pants. No! Now, either everyone in his life needs some help or Yuri doesn't go out enough. Both are possible. Chris accepted his fruity drink from the bartender, throwing a wink the man's way as he did so. Well, now that he has you, I'm sure you'll get him out and about soon. Any pole dancing happen yet? Victor's hand slammed against the bar. No! He moaned pathetically. It's as if Yuri doesn't even want to think about what happened at the banquet. Just when I think something would be enough to get him to talk about it, he doesn't. To be fair, he was wasted, but he added up your leg repeatedly, and then he danced almost completely naked and took control of you when you both danced together. He might be embarrassed about it. He usually isn't so forward with people, but can get feisty when a moment calls for it. And as is Japanese, and PDA isn't an accepted thing in Japan, so he might not want to think about what he might consider to be rude. Maybe. And as a case. Victor huffed a laugh. First, that was our first kiss, and he was far too shocked to really reciprocate. The Swiss man whistled and shook his head, downing his drink easily. That's rough. There was silence between them, and the faint music of the bar sounded behind them. Maybe you should be a little more obvious with him, suggested Chris, cocking a playful brow. Go back to your hotel and kiss him again. What he does will tell you if he's open to a relationship or not. Did that work for you? A wink. Now that would be telling. But if you're really curious, a poll was involved. And don't worry, not being soulmates doesn't really have any bearing if you really love each other in the end. Thank you, Yuri. Yuri hugged his coach/boyfriend tightly. It's fine. Just go and be safe. I'll be fine here. I can do it. Seeing Victor off had been heartbreaking as he wasn't allowed to go to the airport with him. He needed his rest, according to Victor, and he had a day between the short and free programs to get himself together, because Victor couldn't be there. Maka's unfortunate emergency vet visit was certainly worrisome, now of all times, but Yuri wouldn't dare be so selfish as to have Victor stay with him, or to withhold the information from him. Yuri couldn't bear the guilt of not being able to be with his own poodle when he had been rushed to the vet during the Sochi GPF, and he wouldn't ever wish that kind of suffering on Victor. The man was too good and sweet to deserve something like that. I'll be waiting at home for you, Victor said before he left, and Yuri stood in the middle of the hotel lobby, watching the back of his boyfriend disappear out in the cold. Yuri had managed a lot in his life without Victor being there. He could handle this. He could do it. He had the support of his friends and family and Victor himself as well. Just because Victor wasn't there in person did not mean that his heart wasn't with Yuri. Yuri took a deep breath. This was the time for him to prove that Victor didn't waste his time. And it would be a lesson for others that just because they weren't soulmates didn't mean they weren't good for each other. Yuri was going to prove to the world this time that he was worthy of Victor Nikiforov. Victor already believed it, but now the world needed to know too. The first time it was to prove that Victor was his, and this time it was to prove that he was worthy of having Victor as his. What would the next time demand of him? Because damn it all, there would be a next time! So, I know you didn't really answer, but would you prefer this to be known as an engagement ring? Victor had prepared himself for the worst, meaning Yuri would refuse him, and he hadn't really wanted to get his hopes up about it. But he was also a really curious person and didn't like not knowing things or being uncertain, so he had to ask. I would love to marry you, Victor. I just can't believe you'd want to marry me after what I did. Victor sat down beside Yuri and took his hand, enjoying the shine on the ring that adorned his finger. You showed me the best time of my life, Yuri. Why wouldn't I want to marry someone who makes me happy? So Yuri hadn't remembered the banquet at all, and it kind of frustrated him a bit. But it also meant that he hadn't been leading Victor on for months. And it also meant that Victor might have made an ass out of himself a few times, and Yuri had been very tolerant of his attitude and actions anyway. So they were even in a sense. People will be angry because we aren't soulmates, Yuri pointed out, allowing their fingers to link. Who cares? Our happiness should be what matters most. It's not as if our relationship is anyone's business anyway. Yuri's endearing smile lit up his face, and he shifted so he could throw his arms around Victor. A lot had changed in the past few months. His Yuri was a lot more open to physical contact and let Victor hug him whenever he wanted. It was probably the best thing to happen in the past 8 months. Well, there were a few other things, like Yuri putting a ring on his finger. But yeah, being able to be so open with Yuri and not fear rejection from him was the best. We'll have to do the wedding after the season is over. There will be too much practicing and not enough time for us to really plan a wedding. Victor was bouncing in place. The thought of actually planning a wedding to Yuri can't keep making him elated. I can't wait to tell Mama Hiroko. Shouldn't I tell her as I'm her son? Maybe, but I should ask your parents for their blessing, shouldn't I? Yuri's answering flush was the most beautiful thing that Victor had ever seen. I suppose, admitted Yuri. Marini-chan or Minako-sensei might have already told them though. That's fine. This is important to me. I want to do it right. And that also meant that Victor could finally show Yuri his power. Because if Yuri loved him for who he was, he wouldn't mind that Victor's power was probably the most attention-seeking power there ever was. He'd still think Victor was beautiful either way. Yuri sat up as the local news showed something about a burning building. The woman reporting on it was standing a safe distance away and was speaking in rapid Russian, no doubt explaining what was going on to the viewers. Yuri's Russian wasn't very good, but his attention was more on the fire than on trying to figure out what she was saying. The building looked very familiar. Vega, could you come here for a moment and tell me if that burning building looks familiar to you? I swear I've seen it before, but I can't remember where. The man sauntered out from the kitchen, where he had been busy cooking them dinner, and the moment his eyes landed on the television, his mouth dropped open and he screamed, Yuri! Shit, it was Yurio's building! That would explain all of those sirens that had sounded several minutes previous. They just assumed a faulty fire alarm like always. It happened a lot in the area. Yuri was on his feet immediately and Victor was rushing to shut the stove off and put the food aside. We have to go see if he's okay! Why didn't he call us? Yuri's question made both of them pause and stare at each other in horror at the thought that no doubt assaulted both of them. What if he couldn't call them? I'll get Makachin! You go and get ready! Yuri said, grabbing the dog leash off the windowsill and whistling for their beloved poodle, who came running from their bedroom, looking excited at the prospect of another walk that day. When Victor reappeared, he had his mobile out and was trying to call Yurio, who wasn't responding. We need to hurry! Yurio, living 12 blocks away, had to be the best thing because it took them a quick 5-minute run to make it to his street. And it was good that they hadn't tried to catch a cab because the entire street was blocked off by firefighters and cars, with concerned people waiting in clusters around the area, pointing and whispering. Victor simply pushed his way through the crowd, and Yuri was too worried to care about apologizing for their rudeness. There were several ambulances, and people were strapped to gurneys. No blonde hair, though. Yuri looked around frantically, trying to find any sign of the blonde. He would be cursing, most certainly. Cursing his heart out over this if he was involved. Yuri! There he is! Victor's pointing revealed Yurio sitting on the back of an ambulance, an orange blanket around his shoulder, and a mask over his face. His face was red and covered in dark patches, eyes reddened. Yurio! Victor called out, pushing past an officer who tried to bar him entrance into the area and reaching out to yank the teen into a hug. We came as soon as we saw the news! Maga barked and jumped up, placing her paws on the teen's knees and bumping her nose against his chin. She whined. He removed the mask for a second to hoarsely say, My cat. The attempt at speaking led to an intense coughing fit where the mask had to be reapplied. He was being supplied oxygen, meaning he'd gotten enough smoke in his lungs. Yuri was caught between worry for the boy and worry for the cat, and turned his head to stare up at the 10-story building that was still on fire. Animals in danger had always been a soft spot for him. The firefighters were supposed to be those with powers focused towards water, because water should put fires out, but it seemed as if these ones weren't very good at their jobs. Even with so much water being pumped into the building, nothing appeared to stop the fire that seemed to have taken every floor in its wake. They couldn't find my cat, he heard Yurio say, followed by another fit of coughing that sounded more like choking. If it had been Vikchan, Yuri would have gone in immediately. Nodding to himself and taking a strengthening breath, Yuri thrust Maka's leash into Victor's hand and started removing his coat. Yuri! I'm getting the cat! Victor's arm blocked his way before he could step toward the building. Yuri, you can't do that! You'll just get hurt! Let the people trained for this and who are actually protected try to get Yurio's cat! While touched by his fiancée's worry, Yuri took his hand and gave it a squeeze. Don't worry about me, Vitya. I am protected. His body took less than a second to make the full change. Fire doesn't bother me. Both Victor and Yurio gaped when Yuri's skin changed into something familiar to the both of them, and shared a look of horror when Yuri ran into the burning building straight through the fire, blocking the doorway without a care about the firefighters demanding he stay back, or the horrified screams of the worried bystanders. He's your soulmate, Yurio stated in awe before coughing again. Yuri was just like Victor was. He had the exact same power. He turned into a diamond too. Victor had to force himself back to the present, though. While amazing that he had found his soulmate on his own, he had to think about what it meant. He and Yuri sharing the same power. Fire and heat didn't bother them, so if Yuri could run full scale into a burning building without fearing for his life, then Victor could too! Yuri, watch back up for me! Not even bothering with his own coat, Victor followed after his fiancée, noting that Yuri's change was much faster than his own. They were going to have to discuss that part much later, once the drama was over. Not having to breathe when becoming a walking diamond couldn't be any better than right now. His mouth remained closed at all times, and he wasn't susceptible to getting smoke at his lungs or running out of breath, meaning he could get in and out without much trauma. Yurio's flat was on the second floor, and the fire had spread far, covering the entire corridor in flames and looking terrifying. If his heart wasn't solid as stone at the moment, he'd probably be panicking. Still, Victor forced himself to continue, ignoring the fact that he was literally running through fire. Also, he could find his soulmate/fiancée. He could hear Yuri making the universal noise that people used when trying to attract felines. Luckily, Victor managed to catch up to him in time because the burning ceiling, which had started chipping who knows how long ago, was beginning to collapse around him. Yuri was on his knees in Yurio's bedroom, trying to fish the cat out from under the bed. The cat was understandably hissing and meowing in distress. Coming up behind them, Victor grabbed the bed and tossed it to the side, startling both the feline and his fiancée, who turned to gape at him. "Fire doesn't bother me either," was Victor's genius comment. He couldn't think of anything else to say at the moment, though, so that had to be his explanation. "We need to get out of here. The building is going to fall on us." Yuri nodded, the amazed sheen in his diamond eyes turning to steel immediately, and he snatched the unwilling cat up into his arms. "The window or the door?" he asked, but Victor was already gesturing toward the window. "I'll be right behind you!" Yuri made certain the cat was locked tightly in his arms before he literally ran for it, crashing through the window and down to the ground below. The screams of the spectators and the resulting thud of Yuri's landing were enough to tell Victor that it worked. A quick glance around had him diving for a photo of Yurio and his grandfather on the burning desk, snatching it up before it could be taken by the roaring flames. Fire, when it was bigger than a hand in size, sounded so strange, he realized as he turned for the window. Now, he had expected to just fling himself out as well and join Yuri immediately. Unfortunately, the floor beneath him caved in distantly. As he fell, he remembered Yurio complaining about his landlady not wanting to fix the entire complex up, and now he knew why. The floors were wooden and weak and very easy to burn, apparently. He wasn't fazed by the landing, and the beams of wood falling on him didn't even warrant much other than a bored glance. The photo was safe, his Yuri and the cat were safe. It was time to get out. Katsuki Yuri runs into a burning building to rescue his fellow skater's cat. Victor Nikiforov chases after his fiancée to save Yuri Plazetsky's pet. Yuri Plazetsky, victim of arsonist attempt? Katsuki Yuri and Victor Nikiforov, soulmates? Soulmates bravely dive into flames to save a stranded feline. Figure skating champions become cat rescuers? Basically, the news of Yuri and Victor's new relationship status and their heroic actions had spread in less than an evening. Both were being hailed as heroes, their faces plastered all over social media for people to see. But they weren't exactly interested in that part. It was Yurio's health that was most important. Saving his cat and the photo of his grandfather and himself from when he was little was the important part. The blonde had been sedated and put through a bronchoscopy in order to assess the damage possibly done to his lungs from inhaling so much smoke before he was forced from the building. Minor damage, thankfully. But he was to be on bed rest and had been prescribed an inhaler for the foreseeable future in order to keep his breathing even. Yakov had been contacted immediately, and he forbade the teen from skating for 2 weeks, just to be on the safe side. And of course, Yurio came to stay with both Victor and Yuri. Lilia had offered to take him in, but the teen seemed to prefer the company of his fellow skaters at the moment, though he'd been strangely grateful for her offer. "Thank you," the blonde murmured quietly when Yuri got him settled in for the evening. "For helping, even though it wasn't your job." Beside him rested his cat Anya, who had been given a clean bill of health. Yuri smiled and patted the teen's knee. "Job or not, I could help, and that's what matters." Yurio was left to his own devices in their guest room, allowing him to have his privacy. When Yuri found himself once more in the lounge, he saw that Victor was sitting on the sofa, looking contemplative. With a shrug, he plopped down beside the man and didn't hold back when leaning all of his weight on him. So, we're soulmates. Victor nodded. Yeah, for years I had started to worry that I wouldn't meet my soulmate. But then I met you and I thought, I don't need a soulmate. But I was still scared to show you my power because no one but me ever thought it looked cool. And I wasn't sure how you'd react. Sympathetic, answered Yuri. But only because I've lived with this my whole life and had to get used to it. It took a lot of work and struggle. I almost couldn't become a skater because of how I randomly changed when I was scared or startled. Victor's horrified gasp had him nodding. Yeah, we might not have met otherwise. But I took my training seriously and now here we are. He was shifted enough so Victor could wrap an arm around his shoulders and pulled him closer. I'm really glad to have met you, Yuri. And I'm also super happy to know that I managed to fall in love with my soulmate before either of us even knew we were each other's perfect match. This shows that I'm brilliant! Yuri snorted and leaned up to peck Victor on the lips. You're a dork! That's what you are! I am not! You know, yeah? Yuri purred, making sure that Victor could understand his change in mood. I have an interesting piece of information for you. Victor was at least good at picking up on sexual cues because he tilted his head closer to Yuri's and murmured, "What?" in a low voice. I can turn certain body parts of mine into diamonds, and I've learned how to manage the thickness and just how diamond-like those parts can get. Oh, really? Yuri pulled himself up in order to straddle Victor. And as you know, stones can be pretty hard and durable, if you know what I mean. I think I know very well what you mean. If he squeaked when Victor stood and hefted him into his diamond arms, it was no one's business but his own. Let's go test our endurance, Yuri. I hope you can keep up, Vitya. Turned out the only downside to turning into a diamond was the hard as a rock puns.